In this video, I'm going to explain the immune system in the fashion that I think is the easiest way to understand the immune system and describe in the context of improving immune function. So the best way to look at it is to understand that the immune system has anti-inflammatory and pro-inflammatory functions, except that if you live in a deflamed and healing state, that is an anti-inflammatory state. So we want to have anti-inflammatory immune systems. And an anti-inflammatory immune system has the capability of responding properly to invading pathogens. Right now, of course, the coronavirus is the big issue. So this video that I did recently criticized all of this boosting of immune system language that is used out there, because a boosted immune system involves an overproduction of cytokines, and that leads to the cytokine storm that kills people. So using this language, boosting, strengthening, is just not the correct language. So let's look at who is showing up in hospitals now and being hospitalized because of the coronavirus. Almost 90% involve comorbidities. So let's look at them. Hypertension, obesity, chronic lung disease, typically smoke-induced, diabetes, it's a type 2 diabetes, type 1 probably at risk too, but type 2 diabetes is a lifestyle choice that people go for, and then cardiovascular disease. So you can see the age groups from 18 to 49, or 18 to over 65, those who are being hospitalized. So people say, well, you know, it's not just old people. No kidding, it's young people too, but what's wrong with these younger people who are 18 to 50? Hypertense, obese, look at this, 60% of those hospitalized in the 18 to 49-year-old group were obese. So you'll see that obesity in this video is really the issue that needs to be addressed to normalize immune function. That'd even be better language. What are you doing all this stuff for? To normalize my immune function. So what did they say in this article from Medscape? These findings underscore the importance of preventive measures. And I think, oh, good, prevention. Get out in the sun, breathe fresh air, exercise, maintain normal weight, get adequate sleep, modify your stress, and eat an anti-inflammatory, healthy diet, whole food diet. Is that what these preventive measures are? No. Social distancing, respiratory hygiene, wearing face coverings. That's all they talk about. It's absolutely shocking to me that they don't talk about stuff in more detail. So what is it about these people who end up sick? Well, they're pro-inflammatory and they're much more likely to have a cytokine storm. So why would anyone want to boost the immune system when this is the boosted immune system state that creates the cytokine storm that can kill patients who have the flu and COVID? So that is why I created this image that you can go to DeFlame Nutrition on Facebook and pull this if you want. But you know, frankly, boost is really not the best because you want to normalize immune function. I just showed this because these are the steps that you can take if you want to see the Grim Reaper soon. All these lifestyle choices everyone knows are bad. Now these lifestyle choices drive towards having a cytokine storm, and that is why this language was used. I'm going to change it and show you a better image, but in the meantime though, there's a reason why saying boost the immune system is the way to work. And the reason why is because, like I showed in my last video, what do people with allergies take? Well, they take antihistamines. Well, where did histamine come from? Well, they come from mast cells, part of the immune system, that are boosted in activity. So antihistamines suppress, inhibit histamine activity. And there are medications that can actually stabilize mast cells, so you suppress mast cell function. So the word boost doesn't make sense when suppression is involved. Now, all of you listening have heard for sure in the news that, well, here it is, chloroquine, which is the same as hydroxychloroquine. So hydroxychloroquine is being used to treat coronavirus patients. Now, what does hydroxychloroquine do? It is immunosuppressive. So they reduce T cell and B cell hyperactivity. You want to boost? See, boosted T cell and B cell equals hyperactivity is the problem. and that is why I criticize immune boosting. What does vitamin D do? Well, vitamin D is known to be beneficial to reduce infections. It's good for, that doesn't cure, but it reduces incidence of infections. It can reduce autoimmunity. Well, how does vitamin D do this? Well, the lion's share of vitamin D has immunosuppressant properties. So that's why I criticize the immune boosting. What would be a better way, though, to be a better way as opposed to just endlessly fight, in my case, with the immune boosters? Well, the Grim Reaper, what he really wants you to have, or whatever, the Grim Reaper, what it really wants you to have is a pro-inflammatory immune system. So to create a pro-inflammatory immune system, this is what people need to do, which is what most Americans do. They don't exercise, they're obese, they overeat all day, and they hardly ever eat vegetation. Lots of them sleep poorly, they become mentally, emotionally distressed. Some of them smoke cigarettes, drink alcohol in excess. Never brush your teeth or floss. That'll jack up the pro-inflammatory immune system. Never go in the sun. Don't take vitamin D. And then, of course, psychological factors that create chronic inflammation. So if you do 1 through 9, you will now have a pro-inflammatory immune system that will cause chronic pain, depression, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, other diseases, and make viral and bacterial infections much more severe and eventually kill you. So we don't want to have a pro-inflammatory immune system. Now, what does that mean? Well, this is an image showing an anti-inflammatory immune state. That means it is a deflamed and healing immune system. So I think with the language that I like is don't boost, don't normalize, deflame, because the average person's immune system is hyperinflammatory. What does that look like? Well, a normal immune state will be able to properly release, when needed, these important factors. We need pro-inflammatory cytokines produced properly, anti-inflammatory cytokines produced properly. We need growth factors, chemotactic. These guys attract white blood cells into areas of infection and injury. Free radicals, we produce them normally. Too much is a problem. We want to be able to eliminate. Phagocytosis refers to the engulfing and elimination of bacterial and virally infected cells, as well as tissue debris after tissue injury. And of course, we want to have proper body-produced, and this comes largely from vitamin D, bactericidal agents. So this is normal. Now, what happens to us when we do these things here? What happens to us? We create a pro-inflammatory immune state. What does that mean? We have increased pro-inflammatory cytokines, increased growth factors, increased chemotactic agents, create that swarm of immune cells that exists when we look at an obese patient that I showed previously. I'll show you again in a little while. Increased free radicals. And then another example of a pro-inflammatory immune functioning state is reduced anti-inflammatory signs, reduced production of bactericidal agents, the biggest being cathelicidin from vitamin D, and reduced phagocytosis. So when we have this state, this pro-inflammatory immune state, because you can see we boost pro-inflammatory factors. This is what kills people, the cytokine storm, and we have reduced anti-inflammatory factors. So this is probably, when we have this, we go towards the cytokine storm that kills people. So this is where we want to be, normal immune function. When you are normal and you are exposed to immune stimuli, such as cold, flu, or coronaviruses, you will have a heightened immune response, which may or may not produce symptoms. And for some, it will produce a lot more, because you can be lean and healthy, but be stressed out by lack of sleep and fear and catastrophizing, and that enough, and then maybe cold temperature changes, other immune stimuli, dusts, etc., and then have a heightened immune response. But you're far less likely if you're living in a deflamed state. So we compare that to people living in a pro-inflammatory immune state. When they are exposed to cold, flu, and coronavirus, they are much more likely to have this situation. So who are these people who are more likely to be in this situation? Well, they are the obese people. So, and the people with metabolic syndrome, hyperglycemia. So how much of a problem is this? This is from 2014. 70% of adults and 30% of children are at an unhealthy weight, meaning they're overweight or obese. Almost 40% of US adults now are obese. What does that look like? As I showed in previous videos, this is a normal fat cells, normal anti-inflammatory immune cells inside the fat tissue, because fat tissue is made up of fat cells and immune cells. Look what happens when you become obese. Big fat-laden, lipid-laden adipocytes going through necrosis, massive immune infiltration. These cytotoxic T cells and natural killer cells otherwise only show up when there is a viral infection to deal with or if there's a tumor. So you can see what obesity is. It creates a cancerous and viral infection-like state of immunity. So the immune function in obese people looks like for the purpose of this time, the beginning of 2020, the coronavirus, it creates a coronavirus pre-state. So they're already living. So when these people are exposed to a viral agent, they're much more likely to react. So it gets worse when you're diabetic. Now, not everybody who is obese is diabetic, but when you are, look what happens. So I just Googled diabetes as an inflammatory disease, clicked on this picture here, and there it is. Read this article 10 years ago, actually. You can see the title, Type 2 Diabetes as an Inflammatory Disease. So here is glucose, hyperglycemia. It goes to the pancreas, where you have beta cells. Now when beta cells are hit with glucose, beta cells release something called insulin, which everyone has heard of. And then insulin deals with the glucose. Insulin causes glucose to enter. The biggest place where glucose is dumped is skeletal muscle. So what happens when you have type 2 diabetes is that glucose is not properly getting into skeletal muscle, which is why we end up with hyperglycemia. What is not well known is that hyperglycemia causes the pancreas beta cells that typically produce just insulin. They start pumping out pro-inflammatory cytokines just like immune cells. They also release chemotactic agents which invite more immune cells into the pancreas, which over time causes death to these immune cells, which is why people with type 2 diabetes often end up taking insulin because they have destroyed their beta cells. So you can see that obesity and type 2 diabetes collectively augment the inflammatory state. So we are going to look at an area of pro-inflammatory immune function that involves reduced phagocytic activity. So you can see the title, Phagocytic Activity is Impaired in Type 2 Diabetes, and phagocytic activity, which gets rid of bacterial infections, virally infected cells, and tissue debris after injury. That activity, that phagocytic activity, is improved after improving glucose control. So you can see here in this study, type 2 diabetic patients had a lower percentage of activated macrophages. These are the cells that engulf or phagocytose virally infected cells as well as bacterial agents and tissue debris after injury. So we're going to look at this paper now and look at the charts in this article. So here what they showed us, they had type 2 diabetic patients and they had control patients. What I want you to recognize initially is very important is this. You see obesity in the controls. These people were obese. Their body mass index was 37 plus almost 10, so up to 47 down to 27. And then the type 2 diabetic patients, same basic body weight. They were obese or less obese, overweight. So they're both obese, but look at fasting glucose. Now I'm going to change this a little bit to help you out. Here we go, to change that. Here you go. So we, in the US, fasting glucose, so here's your obesity, BMI over 30, BMI over 30, both were obese, but look at the diabetics. Their fasting glucose was averaged 175. It should be below 100. Now these controls they were just slightly above 100. So these controls had the glucose levels consistent with metabolic syndrome. They were also obese. So these individuals were metabolic syndrome patients. They were not type 2 diabetic patients. Now look at phagocytosis in the people who had obesity plus diabetes, 54%. If you were just obese and did not have diabetic blood sugar levels, you had better phagocytosis. Now what does this look like? How they chart it out? So here's the chart. You can see this is for non-diabetics. This is for type 2 diabetics. So these people had metabolic syndrome, though, so their glucose was still too high. You want to be... And what they didn't do in the study is they should have showed us where lean, normal individuals that were, so they were not obese, they were lean, fit, and they had normal glycemia and normal hemoglobin A1C. That is what they should have showed as well, to show you where they showed up, probably up in here. So look what happens. As fasting glucose gets worse, and these are the people showing where their fasting glucose was, look what happens. There is a drop in phagocytosis. So this is tracking increasing levels of blood glucose with reduced phagocytic activity, and it tracks also for hemoglobin A1C. So hemoglobin A1C is a measurement basically of the last 120 days of glucose control, because hemoglobin in red blood cells gets sugar-coated. It's called glycosylated. So the higher the number, so normal is here, about here. 5.7, less than 5.7 is normal for hemoglobin A1C. So you want to be less than 5.7. So you can see not very many people were less than 5.7 ultimately. Now you might say, well, why was this guy less than 5.7 but had bad phagocytosis? Probably because he's obese. I'll show you why in a little while. So as you look at increasing hemoglobin A1C, there is again a trend for reduced phagocytic activity, which means a difficulty eliminating bacterial infections and virally infected cells. Okay, so this is a picture showing, it's a graphic that measures phagocytic activity. Again, phagocytic activity is how you get rid of bacterial infections and virally infected cells. And so what they did is they did 5-day intense treatment. I'll show you what that is. So this is before treatment. And this is showing improved phagocytosis after treatment for 5 days. So what did they do in those subjects? Well, here's what they did. So they had 21 total individuals. And then they took the 12 who had the highest level of hemoglobin A1C, and they treated them. They modified their treatment to improve glucose control, and it was measured in terms of hemoglobin A1C. So 6 of the 12 were already taking metformin, which is what it does is it reduces excess glucose production by the liver. It's called gluconeogenesis. It inhibits gluconeogenesis in the liver, and it improves muscle uptake of glucose. Plus, 6 of these people were also taking insulin. So in these people, they gave insulin at breakfast, lunch, and dinner to augment, to reduce hemoglobin A1C. Now, 4 patients were taking metformin, which I mentioned before, and sulfonylureas. Now, what a sulfonylurea does is, glyburide, glipizide. Those are sulfonylureas. So sulfonylureas, what they do is they stimulate beta cells to pump out more insulin. So they took people off of sulfonylureas and gave these people long-acting insulin. And then the 2 remaining patients out of the 12, they were already taking metformin, and they were optimized by diet. Okay, so let's look at the values that they came up with here. So this was the group of 12 individuals, right? So the intervention people, 12 individuals, and they looked at them on day 1 and then day 5. And you can see what they did here. So we're actually going to modify slide. We're going to take out, so you see what I did here? I'm going to take out, so basically a little more than half of all subjects were women. And then they did this thing called a 9-point glucose profile, which was improved, you can see, but that wasn't compared to the original group. So I'm going to take this out. And fructosemia was measured too. I'm going to take that out and show you the stuff that we looked at before. That's all we need. So you can see body mass index, you can see the same, obviously because it's just 5 days. Now here's hemoglobin A1C. It was reduced. Coupled with that improved glucose control was an increase in phagocytic activity. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these individuals who, of the 12, right, the 12 individuals, I'm going to compare them to the total group. So you see how obesity is really the issue, that they didn't mention in this article. So this was the original image, and I'm going to change it so we can see. I'm going to get rid of the control group. So here are the individuals who had hemoglobin A1C at 8.78 plus or minus, and it should be again below 5.7. Notice the BMI. Now let's look at the 12 worst people with hemoglobin A1C. These were the 12. Remember the 12 at baseline. So we're going to compare. Hemoglobin A1C was worse in the top 12 than out of the 21 with diabetes. And we're going to look at phagocytosis in the total group of 21 versus those who had the worst glucose control. Now look at this. Even though the 12 who were treated, they had worse glucose at baseline, they had better phagocytic activity compared to the other group. So what is the difference between these two groups? Next image will show. You can see, notice this. This is the group that was treated. They had a BMI of just 30 plus or minus. Now again, you can get rid of this because it's the same for these guys here, right? So let's just focus on the BMI of 30. So they were obese, plus or minus a bit. And you can see over here, BMI 36, way fatter. So look at the difference that we see here. We got fatter, slightly better glucose control, but way worse phagocytosis at baseline compared to the 12 with the worst hemoglobin A1C. They had better phagocytosis. And why was that? That the paper did not mention, because of the obesity issue right here. So obesity seems to be the big factor that we should be focusing on. Getting people have now, a paper just came out, or a news article in the New York, I think it was the New York Post, showing obese people are the biggest issue. And indeed, they are the biggest issue because they have a boosted pro-inflammatory immune state. This is where they live. They have increased pro-inflammatory cytokines, growth factors, chemotactic agents, free radicals, and they have reduced anti-inflammatory cytokines. And so they also have, obviously you can see here, reduced phagocytosis. Now you throw diabetes on top of obesity and all of this just gets worse. So that is why I modified that image before to this one here, stating that the Grim Reaper wants you to have a pro-inflammatory immune system. And then here are the steps to get there. Everyone knows these are really bad lifestyle choices. They create a pro-inflammatory state that will increase the bitter end. So we want to avoid the pro-inflammatory state and pursue an anti-inflammatory immune state. Very, very simple and straightforward. So how can we do this? Lots of ways. Here's my approach, obviously. We want to get rid of these pro-inflammatory foods, which create all these pro-inflammatory diseases. And the steps are all described in the various original DeFlame diet books, Secrets for Weight Loss, Breast Cancer is a Flamey Scenario 2, and the most recent book as well. In the DeFlame diet book, there is a chapter in there about immune function that describes it in this context of facilitating the anti-inflammatory immune state while suppressing the pro-inflammatory immune state. So if you like this video, please, you can go to Facebook and like the DeFlame Nutrition Facebook page, share these videos, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and if you want, pick up one or more of these books.